Welcome to New Mexico Black Rifle Operators Union. I'm your host, Sean. So, we've got some interesting news in multiple places. I'm going to start with the 7th Circuit Court, which is out of Illinois in that area of the United States, where they actually ruled in favor of banning AR-15s. So they've held this up in court in that part of the country. This was a Obama-appointed judge, and it was a Reagan-appointed judge that sided with the court in this case, or the prosecutors in this case, I guess is what you'd put it as, to say that the AR-15 is not protected. Now, this goes to prove that it doesn't matter if you're right or left. Judges have biases, and we need to be cognizant of that, and the wheels of justice move very slowly. But in that same vein, we have something that could be a major win for the 2A, and this is Cargill versus Garland. So if you don't know what this is, and this has been settled in court, but it's bubbling up to the highest court now, the Supreme Court has accepted the Cargill versus Garland case. And what this is the bump stock case. So this has been settled in lower courts, but they're continuing to push it forward. The state is, or the government is, trying to push it forward to make sure that bump stocks are banned, that they are in fact machine guns. Now, with the recent rulings that have come out with the EPA cases that say that they're certain organizations, alphabet organizations, don't have the ability to arbitrarily change law or make law, it looks very likely that they're going to kick this and say, no, you can't do this. Now, why is this a big deal for us in the 2A? Well, number one, the bump stock thing is just an accessory. If you have a 3D printer, or if you have a rubber band, or if you have a belt loop, and you know what you're doing, you can bump stock a gun, or bump fire a gun, more specifically. So it's not something that's too outside of the realm of just doing this normally, but this has bigger implications specifically for the pistol brace rule, specifically for the receiver rule, specifically for the RTF, so the forced reset triggers, or FRT triggers, I'm sorry, not RTF. I always get those backwards for some reason. So what this means is that taking this case is going to show Chevron in its full glory, and that what I mean is Chevron deference, that the ATF has overstepped its bounds, and that they don't have this power, and yet they're trying to use this power without going to Congress. And this is something that we all know. We all have been complaining about it. I've been complaining on it for months now about the the pistol brace stuff, and how the ATF just doesn't have this power that they're trying to say they do. So, having the Supreme Court, which actually has accepted the Cargill case, now puts us in a very good position to once and for all smack these people back to reality and make them realize that the ATF does not have this power, and you cannot arbitrarily make laws without going through Congress, first and foremost. In that same vein, the new Speaker of the House has put forward a budget measure that is going to defang the ATF. They're going to defund the ATF. The other thing that's cool with that same type of stuff is they've defunded the IRS to fund war. I guess that's the bad part. Ukraine, and to send money to Gaza. They're defunding the IRS. So those 37,000 field agents that that they were supposed to get, doesn't look like they're going to get that. Again, for those of you who are very black-pilled about the government, I understand it. But understand we're winning. It's just taking time, and we're going to win these cases. You cannot look at, and read enough about these cases to know that, or have that bad feeling that we're going to lose. We're going to win. It's just going to take a crap ton of time, money, and resources. That's why companies or organizations, they're not companies, they're organizations, like Gun Owners of America and Firearms Policy Coalition and SEF, or Second Amendment Foundation, these guys are the ones that are putting boots on the ground and continually making the ATF and the federal government and the alphabet boys lick their boots. So if you are not a member, I would strongly recommend becoming a member of one of these organizations. The pistol brace stuff has went through court again, and it has been proven yet again that all of us that were covered by the injunctions, if you were a member of one of these organizations or one of the named plaintiff vendors, so if you bought one of these braces and you are one of those vendors specifically, one of those people that bought from one of those vendors, you're covered by that. Now, again, I no longer have one of these because I kind of thinking I'm going to go ahead and, I guess, lick the boot. I want an SBR, and I'm going to make my MP5 an SBR at some point. Now that I have a new job, I plan on doing that probably sooner than later. I got to catch up on some bills and do some other things, but that is one of the goals I have for, this upcoming year, is to make an SBR because it's something I've never done before. More so specifically have a legal SBR, because I don't have an SBR. All of mine are long guns or pistols that are legal, because I've not actually wanted to do this. But the MP5 is one of those guns that after shooting one at Battlefield Las Vegas, I really want one of these, even if it's a civilianized version of one. There's something to be said about the coolness factor of some of these guns that, we look at and we see. Speaking of which, I've been looking a lot at bullpups lately and watching tons of videos. And it's hilarious because even YouTube and Facebook now are showing me videos or advertisements from like Steyr AUG for bullpups. Now, why do I want a bullpup? It's because it's entirely different from anything I would ever own or have owned. Now, I've shot a couple of them. I'm not a huge fan of them, mostly because of my body size. Makes it kind of more difficult to use. But it's an interesting concept that retains the ballistic potential of the 5.56 round specifically. It gives you that longer barrel, but in a package that's about the length of an SBR. And what's interesting about all this stuff that's going on with Congress and the legal situations that are going on, if the pistol brace rule does not get overturned, the next best thing you can do to an SBR, unless you register and get an SBR and all that other stuff, is to get a bullpup. Now, most of them I've shot. So I've shot the X95, I've shot the Tavor, and I've shot the RDB, which is the Keltec version. What do I think of them? The ergonomics is entirely foreign for an American or a Western, well, I would say an American shooter. We do not like them. And I think it has a lot to do with how we use guns. As American shooters, we're used to certain ergonomics, and these are different ergonomics that we have to adjust to. But we're also used to how a gun feels and carries, and when we train, when we do things. I can see myself bumping my hands because there is no longer anything standing in the way when you lean up against cover. So if you're looking like an AK or an AR-15, if you're to brace yourself up behind cover or concealment, you a lot of times can use the mag well or the mag itself to kind of stop the rifle, hold the rifle while you're bracing it so you can fire rounds. With a Tavor or a bullpup in general, you have nothing that's in the way there, so your hands are going to instantly hit whatever barrier you're bracing up against. That also brings up an issue that doesn't sound like an issue until you think about it, is we're used to longer rifles, so if you're leaning around a corner or you're just using that cover to fire from, you have something a lot smaller that you're going to be like trying to do that with. And it will change your body mechanics to where you're going to have to lean out farther, or you're going to have to use less of that cover or concealment to fire your round. Now, that's not a big deal if you're not ever planning on shooting from that type of stuff or training with it, and this is not going to be my go-to rifle. This is one of those pie-in-the-sky things just to add to the collection more so than anything, because some of these guns, like the Steyr AUG, is 80s cool. 80s cool is kind of one of those things that kind of checks a checky box for me for my gun collection. I would own an M60 right now because of Rambo. Not only because it's full automatic, but because it's Rambo. And all the war movies that you've ever seen, Chuck Norris jumping out of the water with an M60. A MAC-10 would be another one. An Uzi would be another one. The Terminator, Uzi 9mm. Just because these are 80s cool. When I was growing up in the 80s, the late, all the 80s and early 90s, thinking about when I started shooting, it made me think about those cool guns. The Steyr AUG was in Die Hard. I remember seeing that. I remember seeing it on Harley Davidson and the Marlboro Man. The bad guys are carrying the Steyr AUG. It's one of those iconic, newfangled guns that my dad would have not been a fan of, but I definitely was because they're different. But they've always been expensive. If you look at a bullpup of any design right now, you're looking at something that's $1,500 to $2,500, okay, and beyond. That would be a flex for some people. And when I say some people, a flex for even me, but a flex to show you have something like this. There's a lot of guys that go out and buy, FN scars of the H or the light version, so the 16 or the 17, and they're flexing those guns, showing off how awesome they are. And for most of us that have just the plain Jane AR-15 that does the same thing, but cost us 1/10 or 1/4 of the cost, we won't say 1/10, 1/4 of the cost of an FN scar, what's the point? And that there's something that speaks to me about that, about the ergonomics and the ability that you have of a rifle. Rifle's fine. If rifle works, rifle's fine. So what's the difference of having a $7,000 scar or a $4,000 scar, depending upon the version you're looking at, versus having a $700-800 AR-15? If you look at the Scar Light, it uses the same magazine as the normal AR-15. In fact, I know for a fact that if you use the Scar Light, the FN-16, the Scar 16, that you can't use polymer magazines because it tends to induce double feeds. So much so that the Scar 16 quit being used by special operators because not being able to use the Magpul new mags that they were being issued without inducing a double feed. Because there's something about how the bolt carrier moves that induces a double feed with those particular magazines, and that you had to use the old metal magazines. And there's nothing wrong with using either, to be honest. I just personally have gotten to be a huge fan of the Magpul magazines because I've not had an issue with any of them, knock on wood. But I like them because they work. Even the AK mags, I would still say I'm a bigger fan of the Russian steel mags or the Russian Bakelite mags for an AK because there's still some parts of these Magpul magazines that I'm not a huge fan of. I like having steel reinforced lips with AK mags because you're interfacing with steel all the time. Plus, if you're ever trying to do push-ups on an AK because you've been watching the Spetsnaz and you want to be that guy, it's probably better to use a Bakelite magazine or to use an AR-15 or use one of those steel mags to try to do that. I personally wouldn't try to do that because I'm still a little too heavy to be trying to do push-ups on my rifle, and it offends my Western sensibilities to use said rifle that way. Do push-ups the old way, the normal way. That's how God intended you to do them. But in the Russian military, AK is your mother, your father, your brother. It's everything. They teach you that it is the one tool you use for everything. They shoot rifle. A rifle is fine. But in Western parlances, you find out that you can use other tools and be just as effective, if not more effective. Thus, the AR-15 is born. The AR-15 is the quintessential rifle, Western American rifle, that I think there's a reason why it is so popular. It is modular in every bit of its design. You can change and swap parts to meet your needs. You can accessorize it as you need. It's the American male, and I hate to say that to you ladies, but it's the truth, Lego set for males. You can swap anything on an AR-15 and make it look cool. You can make it be a hot rod, or you can make it be very functional. Mine are more along the lines of functionality than they are anything else, but that's because I've lived in the eastern world of rifles for long enough that I know accessorizing rifles in the Western way is weird to me because it's so easy. Not because it's bad, because it's so easy. Like I've said, I think 1 or 2 podcasts ago, accessorizing a Kalashnikov is hard. You're going to have to be the guy that fits the furniture, period. Okay, and you're not going to get the same interfaces as easily as you would with an AR-15. So why would I consider a bullpup? Because those same issues fit there. Probably because I'm already a nutcase that already likes the Kalashnikov. So anything weird and interesting kind of piques my interest for a little bit. Would it become my main rifle? No. Truth be told, I've said this to my friends. I've said it on this podcast. If the ball dropped and I'm in the Western world, which would be where I'm probably going to be, it's probably going to be an AR-15 because I can find parts for it if I need to, or I already have it. Magazines are everywhere. The ammunition is everywhere. It is the one rifle that we really have raised to that level of just being generally accepted everywhere. It is as ubiquitous as the F-150 in the Southwest, or a Chevy truck in the Southwest, or a Dodge truck, or any pickup truck in the Southwest, to be honest, because it's there. It is the tractor of the firearm world in the Western world, where the rest of the world, it's the Kalashnikov. And that's because the Russians just gave them away. In the United States, we've had teething problems with the AR-15, but we eventually got it right. And it is the one rifle. And even in its newer guises, where you're seeing the new AR-10s come out with all these other whimsical things, and you're seeing the battle rifle being reborn because it's the new hotness. The 6.5 Creedmoor has breathed life into the battle rifle, which the 308, in my humble opinion, still owns. And the reason why I say that is because the 308 is no slack. It has been in the arsenal since the 40s, and it has been doing the job, whether it's hunting or military service, since then. Can you take those long shots? Yes. Can you do it with a 6.5? Yes. Which is easier? That depends. Which one you've trained most with. I know guys that shoot both, and they'll tell you that the 6.5 is actually easier to make those long-range shots because there's less drop for the bullet. But they'll also tell you that there isn't so much that you can't do it with a 308. I'm going elk hunting in December. And when I go elk hunting, I'm going to probably take my 270. That's what I'm probably going to hunt with most of the time. But I'm going to take a backup rifle, and my backup rifle is a 308. And why? I've killed animals with a 308. I know it'll do what it needs to do on an elk. I'm hunting cow elk. I have no problems carrying a 308. 308 is a great round for just about anything I'd want to do. It's one of those calibers I've talked about before that my dad calls God's calibers. It's one of those calibers that if you've used it, you like it, you use it, and you know it, why would you change? The 6.5 is the new hotness. Everybody wants it. Everyone that's in the new world, in the new space, the new kids coming up, they've seen all the press around it. I find myself siding more and more with boomers nowadays, where I'm like, why? What's the point? I'm one of those guys that doesn't mind having an oddball caliber if it serves a purpose. The 6.5 will never be as widely adopted or accepted as the 308 is. You don't believe me? Go to a little tiny mom and pop shop, pawn shop in whatever corner of the United States you're at, and see if you can find what ammunition you can find on the shelf. I bet you can find 308 faster than you can find 6.5 Creedmoor. That matters. At least to me it does. Plus the reloading data I have. I have 60 some odd years between my uncle, my dad, my brothers, and myself of our own reloading data plus theirs, and all the new reloading data with all the new powders and new projectiles. Why would I give that up? That I understand the 6.5 hotness, and the new hotness for a lot of things, because guns are cool. There is such a thing. I ragged about guns that just piss me off when I've seen them. Speaking of which, someone's put on sale the PS90 with 250-round magazines and optics. And it's got the 16-inch barrel that pisses me off every time I see it. And why it pisses me off is because we can't have the little one. We can't have the Stargate SG-1 one because of our stupid laws. That's why it pisses me off. And any of those other guns that I talk about, them being bubbled, they don't really piss me off. I just don't understand the point. You know, you take a Mosin Nagant and you waste, well, that's how I see it, you waste thousands of dollars to bring it up to a modern standard when that's never been its intention. You know, that's not how the gun was designed. That's not what it was designed to do. Can you do it? Absolutely. Is it cool to do it? That depends. I think the original incarnations of the Mosin Nagant are more elegant than the newer ones that they're trying to shoehorn it into something that it's not. The same thing goes when I look at Mauser rifles. Mauser's still making rifles, modern rifles. But you see like a K98, and it's been dressed up to be something else. That's not what it was designed to do. That's not how it was designed to work. And you're going to see that it's not going to ever be what a modern rifle that you just went and paid a little bit for is capable of doing. And that's where I always have that heartburn between, is it really cool or is it just a gun? And a lot of times, you can ask my friends who go shooting with me, I'm very practical about my guns. The ones that I consider my go-to guns. They're the ones that they have the lights, they have the grips and the ergonomics to make them more functional to fit me and my purposes, but there's very little trick to it. Meaning I didn't do something just because it looked cool. I did it with an intention to make this gun more functional. And that's just how I am. That doesn't mean you can't do something cool that you think is cool. You know, Alpine Tactical posted something today I think is hilarious. You're not a man if you have anything red anodized steel or aluminum on your gun. You know what? If you think that's cool, rock it. I personally kind of agree with Alpine Tactical. But I also know that sometimes you get a screaming deal on a part that you've been waiting for and can't find one. Why wouldn't you get it if you get it cheaper for that price? Because, it's just a part. And if this isn't your go-to gun, what does it matter? And even if it is your go-to gun and you like it, what the hell does anything I say matter? Or anyone else? You know, that's the cool part about the 2A is being individualistic and making the gun fit the shooter and the purpose you intended it to do. If it's recreation, whatever it is, you know. That's something that we all have those little judgmental pieces. I know I do. I know I have my own biases. But I try to let people see what they do. You know, I want to see the coolness of the gun. I'll give it a shot to try to shoot it because I want to shoot something that I'm not used to see maybe there is some secret sauce to this. You know, the pistol caliber carbines were one of those ones that I saw no use for until one of my buddies actually had a 9mm AR and let me shoot it. And then I started seeing that, 200 yards, you can do some stuff with a 9mm. That led me down the path of the MP5 because I always liked the MP5, just the look of it, because I like roller delayed guns. Then I got that. And honestly, it's one of those guns that has been 100% reliable with the right magazines, and if you just use it enough, if you didn't have to go deer elk hunting or you were just using something for self-defense, I don't see why you wouldn't just stick with that one gun. I mean, it actually could do it all. I mean, it couldn't do concealed carry, I don't think. Not very well. But having one caliber, if you're, not rich or you're a working man and you're trying to save on everything else because you have kids and you have one gun or maybe two, maybe you have a pistol and this one gun, why not make it a 9mm and just stock one type of ammunition? It makes a lot of sense to me. So that's what's been going on in the 2A. I think we're winning, despite don't let yourself get black-pilled. There's a lot going on in the world to make you get black-pilled, especially when you see how stupid the government is. Case in point, time change. Name one other organization that had enough hubris to mess with time. None. The federal government did. And we all have to pay for it. Well, except for some of those states that actually got smart and said they're not doing time changes anymore, which I wish New Mexico was one of those ones. It's been on the ballot multiple times in the roundhouse to try to get that approved, and there's always someone that puts a boot in it and stops it. And I wish they'd stop that, because New Mexicans need to quit that entirely. You know, it is 6:15 on a Sunday, and it feels like it's midnight. You know, I'm a guy that likes the fall. I'm a guy that doesn't mind the colder weather. But man, messing with the time, even though the sun has shifted and we're getting darker earlier, doesn't make a lot of sense to me. And the one that's worse for me, and always is when we spring forward in the spring, because now it always throws me off, and in the spring I always want to sleep in, and I don't know why. I've got them backwards for some reason. So there you go. Like, share, subscribe. Most importantly, be great.